Indiana Fever are entering dangerous territory right now, and the scariest part is that Caitlin Clark might be the only thing stopping this season from completely falling apart. Another overtime loss, another exhausted superstar performance, another night where Clark delivered highlight after highlight while the team around her collapsed at the worst possible moments. But this time, fans aren't just frustrated about losing. They're starting to believe something much worse is happening inside this organization. Because after watching Stephanie White's rotations, the bench decisions, and the complete lack of structure once Clark sat down, social media exploded with accusations that the Fever are actively wasting one of the greatest young stars women's basketball has ever seen. And honestly, after what happened against Washington, it's getting harder for fans to defend what they're seeing. Clark dropped 32 points, hit ridiculous shots, played through visible physical exhaustion, and somehow Indiana still found a way to lose at home again. Meanwhile, one of the team's most productive preseason scorers never touched the floor. The rebounding collapsed, the defense disappeared, and now the pressure surrounding Stephanie White is officially reaching another level, because this no longer feels like simple growing pains. It feels like a team slowly losing control of its own season. Caitlin Clark's performance against Washington should have been remembered as one of the defining moments of her young career. Instead, it became another painful example of how much pressure she's carrying every single night. Clark played nearly 38 exhausting minutes, battled through constant defensive attention, and still produced 32 points while hitting some of the most difficult shots of the game. Every time Indiana looked close to collapsing completely, she dragged them back into the fight. The most unbelievable moment came when Clark launched that deep half-court shot that instantly exploded across social media. It felt like one of those superstar moments that should completely swing momentum in your favor. The crowd erupted. The arena came alive again. For a brief second, it looked like Clark had rescued the Fever from another embarrassing loss. But once overtime started, the exact same problems returned immediately. That's what has fans so upset. Clark is doing everything possible to win these games. She's scoring under pressure, creating offense late, and handling an insane workload physically. Yet Indiana still looks completely unstable around her. One statistic especially fueled the outrage online afterward. Clark finished the game with a positive plus-minus despite the Fever losing. Fans instantly pointed to that number as proof that the team completely falls apart the second she leaves the floor. And honestly, it's hard to ignore. Whenever Clark sat down to rest, Indiana's offense suddenly looked disorganized and stagnant. Possessions became rushed. Ball movement disappeared. Defensive energy collapsed. It created the uncomfortable feeling that the Fever don't currently have a real structure outside of hopping Clark saves them possession after possession. What makes this even more concerning is the physical toll starting to show. Reports and discussions around Clark's back discomfort have already created concern among fans, especially considering how heavy her minutes have become so early in the season. She's constantly being trapped defensively, bumped off screens, and forced to create nearly every big offensive moment for Indiana. That's a brutal amount of responsibility for any player, especially one already carrying the weight of the league's spotlight. And despite all of that, Clark still stood in front of reporters afterward, taking accountability instead of making excuses. That's why fans are becoming so emotionally invested in this story. They see a player doing everything possible to elevate the franchise, while the organization around her continues making mistakes that feel completely avoidable. But as frustrated as fans were about the loss itself, the real outrage didn't begin until people started analyzing Stephanie White's decisions. The criticism surrounding Stephanie White exploded because fans genuinely could not understand the logic behind some of the rotation decisions in this game. The biggest concern wasn't just the overtime loss itself. It was the fact that Clark and Kelsey Mitchell looked physically drained by the end of the night, while key bench players remained glued to the sideline. Social media immediately filled with angry reactions, accusing the coaching staff of completely mismanaging the roster. Kelsey Mitchell played nearly 39 exhausting minutes and scored 24 points, continuing to carry a massive offensive load next to Clark. But by overtime, both guards looked exhausted trying to create offense possession after possession. Fans pointed out that Indiana's offensive flow completely disappeared once fatigue started setting in, yet the rotation barely changed. That's where the frustration surrounding Stephanie White reached another level. Many supporters began questioning why the Fever still seemed to have no reliable offensive structure when Clark sits down. Instead of organized sets or balanced scoring opportunities, possessions often turn into isolation basketball and rushed shots. The team suddenly looks frantic and disconnected the moment their star point guard gets rest. That's not just a player issue. Fans believe that's a coaching issue. The reactions online became even harsher because White spent much of the offseason talking about player management and protecting workloads. Yet now Clark and Mitchell are being pushed into massive minutes early in the season while the bench remains underutilized. Some fans even compared the situation to other teams that burned out stars by overloading them too early instead of building stable depth around them. What's making the criticism feel so intense is that Indiana entered the season with playoff expectations, not rebuilding expectations. Fans believed this coaching staff would maximize the talent already on the roster. Instead, many now feel like the Fever are improvising their identity game by game. One night they rely heavily on transition offense. The next night they slow everything down. Defensively, the inconsistency becomes even worse. And once fans started focusing on the bench, the anger only intensified, because one particular decision has now become the center of the entire controversy surrounding Stephanie White. A player who looked explosive during preseason hasn't even been given a real opportunity yet. And according to many Fever fans, that decision alone may already be costing Indiana games. The Shatori Walker-Kimbrough situation has become one of the biggest talking points surrounding the Fever right now, because fans genuinely cannot understand why she's completely disappeared from the rotation. During preseason, Walker-Kimbrough looked like exactly the kind of veteran scorer Indiana desperately needed off the bench. She brought energy, created her own offense, and gave the team a reliable scoring option outside the starting lineup. But now, just a few games into the season, she's collecting DNPs while the starters are being pushed to exhaustion. That decision has completely baffled fans, especially after another overtime collapse where Clark and Mitchell looked physically drained late in the game. Supporters immediately started asking the obvious question: if the starters are carrying such an overwhelming workload, why not trust one of the only proven bench scorers on the roster to stabilize the second unit for even short stretches? The speculation online has become intense. Some fans believe Stephanie White simply doesn't trust her bench yet. Others think there may be defensive concerns keeping Walker-Kimbrough off the floor. But because there hasn't been a clear public explanation, the frustration keeps growing after every loss. And in today's social media environment, silence usually creates even more controversy. What really pushed fans over the edge was the realization that Indiana's offense often completely collapses once Clark rests. Instead of using bench scoring to maintain momentum, the Fever repeatedly fall into long droughts where nobody seems capable of organizing the offense. That's why many supporters believe even 8 or 10 productive minutes from Walker-Kimbrough could dramatically reduce pressure on the starters. There's also a larger concern hiding beneath this debate. Fans are starting to worry that Indiana may not actually know what kind of team it wants to be. Teams with clear identities usually understand their rotations early. They know which lineups create energy, which players stabilize difficult moments, and which bench units can survive when stars rest. Right now, Indiana looks like a team still desperately searching for answers while losses continue piling up. And the dangerous part is that constant rotation uncertainty can quietly damage player confidence over time. Bench players stop knowing when opportunities are coming. Starters begin feeling like they can never sit down. Frustration builds behind the scenes even if nobody says it publicly. That's why this conversation has become so emotional among Fever fans. They don't just see bad substitutions anymore. They see warning signs of a team drifting into instability much earlier than expected. But as heated as the coaching debate has become, some fans believe the deeper issue may actually start with the front office itself. The more fans analyze Indiana's roster, the more criticism starts shifting away from just the coaching staff and directly toward the front office. Because while Stephanie White's rotations have become a major controversy, many supporters now believe the Fever entered the season with glaring weaknesses that were never properly addressed in the first place. And against Washington, those flaws were exposed in brutal fashion. The biggest problem continues to be interior physicality. Indiana simply does not look strong enough around the rim consistently, especially against aggressive front courts. Washington dominated key rebounding stretches of the game and made life difficult for the Fever inside all night long. Every missed Indiana shot felt like the end of the possession because the Mystics controlled the glass so comfortably. That immediately reopened off-season criticism from fans who spent months begging the organization to add more size and rim protection. There's been growing discussion online about whether the Fever underestimated how physical this season would become around Caitlin Clark. Opponents know Indiana's offense runs through perimeter creation, so many teams are forcing the Fever into difficult half-court situations and challenging them physically near the basket. Without reliable interior dominance, Indiana often looks vulnerable whenever outside shots stop falling. Aaliyah Boston's struggles have only intensified those concerns. Boston remains one of the most talented young bigs in the league, but fans are beginning to wonder whether the current system is actually putting her in positions to succeed. Against Washington, she finished with a painful minus rating that immediately became a major talking point online. Some fans blamed conditioning or lingering injury concerns. Others argued the offense simply isn't creating easy opportunities for her near the rim. There's also speculation that Indiana's spacing issues are affecting Boston more than people realize. When defenses load up aggressively on Clark and Mitchell, Boston often ends up operating in crowded areas instead of clean interior situations where she can dominate physically. That creates frustration because fans know how impactful she can be when the offense flows naturally through her strengths. And once frustration starts affecting confidence, everything becomes harder. Players hesitate, defensive communication slows down, finishing around the basket becomes inconsistent. Suddenly, a talented roster starts looking emotionally overwhelmed instead of composed. That's why many Fever fans are becoming increasingly nervous. The problems no longer feel isolated, they feel connected. And unfortunately for Indiana, the defensive numbers only make the situation look even worse. Indiana's defensive collapse is no longer something fans can dismiss as early season inconsistency. It's becoming a pattern, and the deeper people dig into the numbers, the more alarming the situation starts to look. Against Washington, the Fever once again struggled with transition defense, weak side communication, and defensive rebounding. It wasn't one isolated issue breaking the system. It was everything happening at once. The most frustrating part for fans is how repetitive the mistakes have become. Opposing guards are getting downhill too easily. Rotations arrive late. Help defenders seem unsure whether to protect the paint or recover to shooters. Every breakdown creates another scramble situation, and once Indiana loses defensive structure, the entire possession usually falls apart immediately afterward. One moment that sparked heavy discussion online involved Raven Johnson's difficult minutes. Johnson was drafted with the expectation that she could become an important defensive presence for this roster, but her brief appearance against Washington quickly turned ugly statistically. Fans immediately started debating whether she's being deployed incorrectly or whether the pressure of these rotations is simply becoming too chaotic for young players to succeed consistently. That's the dangerous part about unstable defensive systems. Once confusion spreads, even talented defenders start looking lost. Players hesitate instead of reacting naturally. Communication becomes reactive instead of proactive. Suddenly, every possession feels tense because nobody looks fully confident in their assignments. And based on the reactions after this game, many fans believe Indiana is already drifting into that territory. There's also growing speculation online about frustration building internally within the locker room. To be clear, there's no confirmed report of major conflict behind the scenes, but fans have started noticing emotional reactions during games that are fueling conversation. Teammates appearing frustrated after blown assignments, visible disappointment following missed rotations, moments where body language tells a louder story than words ever could. Losing close games repeatedly can create emotional exhaustion faster than people realize. Every missed rebound starts feeling massive. Every substitution becomes controversial. Every defensive mistake gets magnified because the margin for error feels so small. That pressure can quietly affect team chemistry if results don't improve quickly. And now the biggest problem for Indiana is that the conversation surrounding Stephanie White is starting to shift from ordinary criticism into something far more dangerous. Fans are no longer just questioning individual decisions. They're beginning to question whether she's truly the right coach to lead this era of Fever basketball at all. Just weeks ago, the idea of Stephanie White being on the hot seat would have sounded completely absurd. The Fever entered the season with excitement, optimism, and enormous expectations surrounding the Caitlin Clark era. Fans believed this coaching staff would elevate the roster, stabilize the defense, and finally push Indiana into serious playoff contention. But after another painful overtime collapse, the tone surrounding White has changed dramatically. Now social media is flooded with debates about whether she's maximizing the talent on this roster or actively holding it back. Every rotation decision is being dissected. Every late-game adjustment is being questioned. And after watching Clark deliver another superstar performance in a loss, many fans have officially run out of patience for explanations centered around learning and growth. The biggest issue hurting White publicly right now is perception. Fair or unfair, fans increasingly believe the Fever looked disorganized compared to the expectations that surrounded this season. The offense often relies heavily on Clark improvising brilliance under pressure. The defense looks inconsistent possession to possession. And perhaps most damaging of all, the emotional confidence surrounding the team appears shaky during difficult stretches. There's also growing speculation that pressure from the front office could intensify quickly if losses continue stacking up. Again, nothing official has suggested major changes are coming, but that hasn't stopped fans and analysts from openly discussing the possibility. When a franchise possesses a star with Clark's level of influence and visibility, patience tends to disappear much faster than normal rebuilding situations. And that's really what makes this entire story feel so massive. The Fever are no longer just another young basketball team trying to improve quietly. They are one of the biggest attractions in sports right now. Every game is heavily covered. Every mistake becomes national conversation. Every emotional reaction spreads across social media within minutes. That level of attention changes everything. But the scariest part for Indiana may be the long-term concern developing underneath all this frustration. Fans are beginning to fear that if the organization doesn't stabilize quickly, these problems could eventually impact Clark emotionally as much as physically. Constant pressure, heavy minutes, endless criticism surrounding the team, repeated close losses despite heroic performances. That combination can wear down even elite competitors over time. The Fever still have enough talent to turn things around. The season is far from over, but the warning signs are growing louder after every game. Defensive collapses, confusing rotations, exhausted stars, emotional frustration. The noise surrounding Indiana is becoming impossible to ignore. And now, the entire basketball world is watching to see what happens next.